In this tutorial, we'll be showing you how to create this painterly desert landscape scene with a limited palette of acrylic paints. The techniques and style enable it to be done fairly quickly, but also allow for a fairly realistic result. So let's get into it. For this project, we'll be using a 50 by 70 centimetre single thick canvas. For brushes, we'll be using the 11-piece acrylic brush set. And for paint, we'll be using the 8-piece satin acrylic intro set. You'll also need a HB pencil to draw up the scene, a palette knife, and you might want a palette to mix the paint. The first step is to roughly draw up the scene with that HB pencil. You can find this outline on our website. We won't go into too much detail with drawing up the scene. Probably the most important part of this stage is to get the horizon line in the right place. The first step of the painting stage is to tint the canvas. This is also called a ground. Because this is a desert scene, we want some warmth to our ground, so we'll be laying in a mix of scarlet and orange and lay this tone over the canvas, but leave it out of the sky. I use the 1-inch flat to do this. I concentrate more red into the background and add more orange into the mountain areas. Refer to the second image on the website for reference here. For the sky, I create a blue from phthalo blue and titanium white and lay this into the area using that 1-inch brush again. Load the brush with a fair amount of paint and cut in across the horizon. I make the sky lighter the closer it is to that horizon by mixing more white into the coat. Don't make the coat too consistent in colour, as variation adds to the interest. While the coat is still wet, I lay pure titanium white in to suggest the clouds, still using that 1-inch brush. Don't overwork the cloud shapes, just lay them in and roughly soften the edges a bit, then just leave them. We then create a blue from phthalo blue, purple and a touch of white and paint it into the rear mountains in the background. A yellow-green is then painted across the top of the mountains to suggest a plateau area. Whenever colours are laid on like this, let the ground show through, as it tends to add interest. This painting depicts a gorge with a creek meandering through it. Create a beige from titanium white, lemon yellow and orange. Paint this into the area between the base of the two escarpments. I then use this colour and paint it over the top of the rear mountains. A mix of yellow ochre and a touch of medium green and some titanium white is then painted over the top plateau using a 1-inch brush. As this colour is laid on, again ground is allowed to show through in areas, leaving the front of the cliffs free of colour. The beige can then be laid in between the escarpments where the creek lies. This tone can then be painted up the escarpment for the right cliff. An orange darkened with medium green is then laid into the cliffs on both sides, and then orange tinted with titanium white is laid in between the darks. Detail can then be laid into the creek area between the two escarpments. Refer to the colour printout for guidance here. I work down the creek and add vegetation, some blue for the water, a brown for the reflection of the cliffs, and carry the beige across the canvas. I then lighten the green mix and lay in more areas of vegetation over it, allowing that beige to show through. The top portion of the painting is done, and we can now lay in the foreground. For this, we create a yellow-green from lemon yellow, medium green and titanium white, and lay it onto the canvas. Use that 1-inch brush again and lightly apply the paint, but allow for the ground to show through. To create even more texture within the coat, the paint can be applied in crisscross strokes. There is a creek bed that divides the canvas into two halves, so this is left free of colour. Once the yellow-green is all on, I start to apply the vegetation. I create 4 greens. One dark green from medium green with a touch of scarlet, a medium green created from medium green and lemon yellow, a light green created from mainly lemon yellow with a touch of medium green, and a sage-type green created from medium green and titanium white. Then these greens are applied starting from the top of the foreground. A colour created from scarlet red, titanium white and a touch of purple is then scumbled over the creek bed. I then apply small balls of vegetation on the top of the plateau with the sage green mix. I use the small filbert for this. I then use the darker green over the parts of the mountain in shadow, and even smaller applications for the vegetation in the distance. For any vegetation in highlight, I use that light green. I then go slowly over the painting, building up the vegetation in random patterns. Obviously this takes time, so rather than get frustrated, try and take a more mindful approach and relax. The closer the trees are to the viewer, the larger they would obviously be. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Hopefully you've picked up a few tips and gained some inspiration. Stay tuned and remember to keep on creating.